All right, how's it going, everyone? Today we're going to go through connecting to Azure AI services over private endpoints in the Azure Government Cloud. A lot of this stuff translates easily to Azure Commercial, but today we're focused solely in Azure Government on private endpoints. So using a virtual network with every service using a private endpoint, and then public services being disabled. All right. So we're going to start here with the Azure OpenAI service. We're going to first go through each of the services and the VNet and stuff like that. So the first one we got here, networking, I just want to show it's disabled. We have exceptions. You're going to see private endpoint connections. We're going to see the private endpoint. That's this one. And you're going to see this other one here. This is a private link service with Azure AI Search. So this is necessary when using the Add Your Data API. That's part of Azure OpenAI. So we're going to look at both things separately. So we're going to look at sending a request to Azure OpenAI just in itself. We're going to look at sending a request, an API request, just to Azure AI Search. Then we're going to look at using the Add Your Data component of Azure OpenAI. So what that does is it submits the request to Azure OpenAI. Then it works with Azure AI Search to get the results, return them, and then submit them to Azure OpenAI. We're also going to look at document intelligence, connecting to a file, a PDF. It's on a storage account that also has private endpoints. So we're going to look at all that. Big gotcha here. Make sure you have this private link service with Azure AI Search, and we'll look at that right here. So this is Azure AI Search. You can see this is restricted. Let's look at networking. Networking, disabled, but allowed right here. Private endpoint connections. It does have its own private endpoint. So this is the way we can interact with it directly, interact with its API directly. But then we have shared private access. This is where you're going to create a shared private link. You give it a name. Find your resource type. And this one is going to be Cognitive Services Accounts. That's where Azure AI OpenAI resides. You can select your resource. So you can select this before. This also works with the other ones, but this is just with Azure OpenAI. And then so let's select that. And then your resource, there's only one to select. Then you put some info, message here. Then you select create. When that happens, this is going to take a while. It can take 15 minutes. You will see this provisioning state just like churning. Once it's succeeded, connection state will be unapproved. To approve it, you then go over to Azure OpenAI, your endpoint, and you'll see it right here. You'll select this, and then you'll select the approve button. This will take 10 minutes. All right. Document intelligence, we're just going to look at this real quick. Networking, it's disabled, has a private endpoint. And then over at the storage account, it's all in private endpoints. And then you need to generate a SaaS token for that. But we'll come back to that. All right, so I have a jump box here with Postman installed. This jump box is a virtual machine, a Windows Server 2022 in Azure with Bastion. So I'm connecting to it with Bastion. Let's bring that up. Okay, so here's the virtual machine. I only have this one. Networking wise, you can see no public IP, just on the private. And then I connect to it via Bastion. So if this is in your own enterprise network, you'd be connecting to this RDP or something like that internally. I'm connecting to it via Bastion. So you can guarantee it has no public access. It does have internet access once you're in it, but the way to get to it is via Bastion. All right, so now we're in the virtual machine. Some things you can do to test here. You can do NS lookups. It's really important to do NS lookups, making sure you're getting the private IP addresses for services. You can see. There we go. Let's go back to the beginning of this meet. So making sure you do NS lookups on all your services. All right, so the first one we're going to look at here, this is with Azure OpenAI, just a chat completion. So we're just going to do a simple chat. This is to validate that you can connect to the API from this jump box. That means it's on a private endpoint, your jump box is private endpoint, that you can connect to it. All right, so you're going to put your URL in here. Make sure this is the endpoint name right here. This, and then everything else is pretty much the same as for everybody, except for this. This is going to be your deployment name. You're like, what is a deployment name? Let's look at that real quick. So if you go to your endpoint, go to the studio, you go to deployments, your deployment name is this. Not the model name, the deployment name. Let's go back. All right. And then in the message, there's not a whole lot you need to include here. You need a message and stream. We're not streaming because it just shows up cleaner for this situation. You have a system message and we have a user question. In the body, that's in the body. In the header, you need to include two things. Content type, which is application/JSON, and your API key, which is the API key. I'm going to delete this, so don't worry about, I'm not worried about sharing it. And then you select send. Now, because this is not streaming, this will take a little bit longer than you may be familiar with when you do streaming, because you're going to get a response back almost immediately. But it's not as clean to view. There we go. All right, so we're going to get content filter results if you have that set up, and you're going to get your message. And then here is the content message. So this is something you would receive, and then if you have a chat application, you would include that in the chat. All right, so we just validated from my jump box that has a private IP address. Oops. On this IP address connected to Azure OpenAI. We can do a lookup on that one real quick. In the same RFC class. All right, so the next we're going to look at is Azure AI Search. So look at Azure AI Search. We have an index already. We went through and processed this. You will not be able to do this work once you make it fully private, unless you're in the private network. But I'm not logged into this from my virtual machine. Again, I'm not doing any logging into Azure from the virtual machine itself. I just didn't want to do the credentials. So I set all this up beforehand. It's connecting to the storage account. And there's a file under here, this NIST 853. All right, so we're going to do AI search. This is the URL. It's a GET request, unlike POST, where Azure OpenAI is a POST request. This is a GET request. This is the URL. This is the name of your service. This is the index name, and then this is the search. You can see them here in the parameters. You can update them down here in Postman. Header, API key, content type, very similar to before. Body, no body for this. You're just going to submit this. And when you get it, you're going to get this back. There you go. That was quick. This is connecting to it again via private endpoints. It's all internal to the enterprise network. And this is the response. These are the chunks. You're going to get a lot of chunks along with their vectors and all that jazz. All right. So now we've shown Azure OpenAI and Azure AI Search. Now we're going to do the combo API. We're going to call Azure OpenAI, reference Azure AI Search Index to get information back. All right. So the parameters here, very straightforward. URL, it's the exact same URL as the post for just normal chatting without RAG. Changes a little bit here. We have content type, API key, the same. What changes is the body. It's significantly more complex. So we have the message. Notice the message here is a little different because I'm asking a specific question against the data I want to find. Then we have this data sources section. Type Azure Search. Endpoint is your Azure AI Search endpoint. Index name. If you have semantic configuration, you want to select that. Query type, semantic. Hybrid doesn't work yet in government. And you can do these are some field mappings that I included. Scope, role information. Again, you're going to say, hey, this is what you do. There's going to be a couple authentication sections, authentication here, API. And then this is the key to AI search. And then another key, again, the same key to Azure AI search. And then the index name again, a little differently, the name here, value pair is a little different, but again, the index name. Again, stream is false. This can take a little bit because it's now doing multiple things. Sending it to Azure OpenAI. Azure OpenAI is now communicating with Azure AI Search. It is not doing it with the private endpoints. It is doing it with the private endpoint connection between Azure AI Search and Azure OpenAI. So it does not route over private endpoints. It's doing a direct connect from Azure OpenAI to AI Search using this private link service connection. There it goes. It came back. And it reasoned. So before, when we did this with the Azure AI Search, we just got everything. We got the chunks and not everything. But now when we combined it, Azure OpenAI reasoned over your question plus the chunks of data from Azure AI Search and provided a response, including citations and everything in here. This is something, you're going to get all this back in JSON. JSON is very easy to work with the application development. All right, so we don't need that one. This is the same one. Close that. All right, so that is everything for Azure OpenAI and AI Search. All of that is working on private endpoints. So your initial call here is over a private endpoint to Azure OpenAI. But then Azure OpenAI communicates over the private link connection, this one, to Azure AI Search. Azure AI Search provides the information back to Azure OpenAI. Then Azure OpenAI communicates back to the user via its private endpoint. All right, we're going to look at document intelligence because this one's also a little complicated. All right, so we have document intelligence. One thing we have to do here, document intelligence needs to have a managed identity. So when you have your intelligence, turn on system assign managed identity. You then have to go to your storage account, access control, and add that document intelligence as a storage blob data reader. You do that selecting add role assignment, search blob, select data reader, members, manage identity, select the manage identity, find document intelligence, select it, review and assign. Once that's done, you see it in here. Now this document intelligence can communicate and reach into the storage account. Even you have to do that even when you generate a SAS key. So you're going to come over here when you share the URL with document intelligence, you're going to create a SAS key in a URL. So you're going to create this blob SAS URL. Normally, via public endpoints, this works. The authentication in this key, this blob SAS token, will provide access. However, over private endpoints, this fails. You have to, it reverts to the managed identity access. So that's why you have to provide that for document intelligence to work. All right, so let's go back in the jump box. So now we're in the jump box. We're on Postman. Here's the URL to read the file. So the file we have, it's a simple receipt file I downloaded off the internet. You may be like, all right, what model do I use? Because this URL is like this. In Azure Government, it does not have the latest version of document intelligence. So you have, which is version 4, which is in preview. This is version 3. You can get that URL. From the document intelligence site. Up here in the top left, version 3.1. This is what's in Azure Government. So you have to use this API structure. All right, so you have pre-built, so you're like, then you have the models, you're like, this is the model name. How do I know what the model names are? You know, because it doesn't, unfortunately, provide the studio. There isn't a studio yet for document intelligence in government. So it's kind of difficult to understand what models exist or creating your own. All right, to do that, you use this API request. It's going to provide you all the models. All right, to do that, nothing here in the parameters except for the API version. Header, very similar before, content type, but now the key is not API key, it's this OCP APIM subscription, and it's because document intelligence sits behind Microsoft Managed APIM. When you select send, it's going to return. Again, this request is over private endpoints. It's not going to a public version of this. It's going to the private endpoint version of this. And it provides all the pre-built models. Okay, you use the model you want to pick. This one here was receipt. So I use pre-built receipt. So you can see that pre-built receipt. Body, very simple, URL source. This is that source, the link to the file. Where do we get that? Right here, blob SAS URL. When you generate it, blob SAS URL. Copy that, paste it right here in the body. Then you select send. Now when you select send, you're just going to get a 202. You're not going to get anything back. It's because it takes time for this to do its thing. It might actually be done 2 seconds, 50 milliseconds after, but it's not going to provide you a response here. You have to go get the response. Where do you get that information? Select headers, operation location. This is the location of the file. Analyze the results. This is where you get your results. All right, so you get another get request. This is the URL to get the results. Guess what? It's that same URL that I just showed you over here. Copy this. Paste it in here. You have your key connection, you have the same stuff up here. You don't need to do the content type. But before, under the headers, you had content type. When you're getting the request status, there is no content type, just the key. Nothing in the body, just a get request. And then you get the money, then you get the information back from the receipt. You get the text. You can see this is the content of that receipt image. How many pages, it provides all that detail for you. Now you get all that wonderful JSON data. There you go. Document intelligence over private endpoints to a storage account on private endpoints. Everything is on private endpoints. There is no public access, all private endpoints. Just a few gotchas. Document intelligence, system identity assigned to the storage account. Azure OpenAI, private link service connection with Azure AI Search if you want to use the Azure Data API. All right, that's all I got. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.